Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I am your host, Matt Belair, and today we have a very special guest for you. He is a pioneer in end-of-life care. In 1987, he co-founded the Zen Hospice project, the first Buddhist hospice in America. In 2005, he founded the Metta Institute, training countless healthcare clinicians and caregivers and building a national network of educators and guides for those facing life-threatening illnesses. He is the author of the 5 Invitations, Discovering What Death Can Teach Us About Fully Living. His work has been highlighted on the Oprah Winfrey Show, featured on PBS, and honored by the Dalai Lama. Welcome to the show, Frank. Oh, shoot.
Ostaseski. Puts me on a first-name basis with everybody, Matt.
Awesome. Perfect. That's amazing. It's so funny because I always tell my guests I get to pronounce their name right, and I forgot to ask, and I was like, I'm not even going to try. I can't even do it. How are you?
Well, I'm glad to be with you. Really glad to be with you. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. You introduced who introduced us? Jared. And I looked at your work and I was just so excited. I was like, yeah, Jared, like, please, like, it would be a pleasure to talk to this guy. Such an amazing initiative, an amazing life. Do you just want to give people a little bit of background about what you've done? Because it's awesome.
Yeah, well, I as you mentioned in your introduction, I co-founded an organization called the Zen Hospice Project. It was the first Buddhist hospice in America. And honestly, we didn't have much of a plan. We were in San Francisco. There were a lot of people who were needing our help, mostly people living on the street. So I changed a lot of diapers on park benches behind City Hall. For us, it was a kind of fusion of spiritual insight and practical social action. Someone is sick and you take care of them. It's that simple. And we didn't have much more of a plan than that, honestly. So we got together a band of volunteers, brought them out into the streets, and started working with people. And when we could, we would bring some of those people back to the San Francisco Zen Center, put them in an empty room, and take care of them through the course of their illness and through the course of their dying. And they were our teachers. They were the people who really taught us what we most needed to learn. And also, the things that we learned from them have a relevance not just for taking care of people who are dying, but I think for the rest of us and living a wise and wholesome and happy life. Yeah.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, super, super beautiful. And then, so after, what was different between the Zen hospice and just a traditional hospice?
Well, that's a good question. I think that in some ways, some of the activities were the same. You make soup, you change bed linens, you hold the hand of somebody who's frightened, and listen to a lifetime of stories that have been led and are now ending. Nothing special, really. This is just simple human kindness, right? Mm-hmm. The difference is that the people who worked with us, the volunteers and staff, had as part of their experience a meditation practice in their background. So they were cultivating what I might call the listening heart or the listening mind. Yeah, learning to really listen intimately to themselves and to the world around them. Now, we thought there was a match between those people and people who really needed to be heard at least once in their life, people who were dying. Yeah. And so we just put them together, basically. That's all it was. And we didn't push any Buddhism. We weren't interested in that. The people that we worked with didn't care beans about Buddhism. They just wanted to be warm, dry, and inside, And so what we found was this meeting place, this exquisite meeting place between folks that might have walked by that person on the street, and the person who had been living on the street. And suddenly they were thrown together in these very intimate circumstances, and they found that they belonged. They found that they found a meeting place. They found that they were in the boat together. Yeah. And that's what made all the difference. Yeah. And so the people that we worked with, they didn't trust very much. They lived on the margins of society. They didn't care much about systems. They hadn't been treated well by most of the systems. So if we were going to be of any value to them, we had to be really honest. We had to be really straight about our intention. We had to be clear about how come we were doing this in the first place. Yeah, and that what that did was build a certain trust between the people we worked with and our volunteers and staff. Yeah. It's really simple, it's really simple. When you get down to it, at the end of life, it gets really simple. Mm-hmm. Can I trust this person? Are they going to let me fall? Can I let them take me to the toilet? you know. It's really simple stuff. And so if we can meet somebody there with some kind of honesty and integrity and good heart, makes all the difference. Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah, so beautiful. I love how it really does come back to simple. You right at the beginning, you're talking about cultivating a listening heart, and you're in an environment where people are facing their death, and you're offering them love and kindness. And when we talk about Zen or Buddhism, or when I do on the show, and I'm sure you're in the practice, like it's cultivating that practice everywhere. It's not some sort of mystical, out of the box wild thing. Is can we take that and can we apply it to everywhere in our life? And you're doing it in these very extreme circumstances. So it's kind of cultivating a very powerful environment for everybody involved.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, look, mindfulness is the new it girl, right? I mean, it's like everything is mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is the fix for everything. And it's great that mindfulness has reached into the masses in such a beautiful way. But for me, I don't even speak about mindfulness or meditation even. I just speak about intimacy. Learning to meditate is learning to become intimate with yourself and with the world around you, to really know what's happening when it's happening, to sense the body, to feel the heart, to observe the mind in a way that's intimate. Yeah. And if we can do that with ourselves, then we can do it with other people. Yeah. And it's the second thing about that's for me really important is it is ordinary. It's perfectly ordinary. We're always talking about meditation practice like it's some transcendental experience or some, transcendence. It's about being here and now in this world, in this life, in a way that's contactful. Yeah. So here's an example of ordinary meditation practice. There's a guy I used to work with. His name was Ed. He lived in his car. Actually, he lived in two cars. He had a car that he lived in, and he had another car for all his stuff, right? And he lived under a bridge down on 3rd Street in San Francisco. And neither car moved, by the way. But he would sleep in the first car. And I would bring him in the morning. I would come to his car, and I would bring him coffee and donuts, right? And we'd talk. I mean, he'd sit behind the driver's seat because it was his car. I mean, so I sat in the passenger seat, and we'd sit and drink coffee and eat donuts and talk. And once in a while, I would sneak him into the general hospital where the nurses were, to get him a shower and make sure he was getting good care. But he'd always went back to his car. And at one point I said, Ed, it's time to come inside, like you're getting really sick. And he said, no, I'm not coming inside. And I said, come on, Ed. He said, how about if I just pull up my cars out in front of the hospice and you take care of me in my car? And I said, well, Ed, I don't think that's going to work. Come on inside, So Ed's a regular guy. He's a guy like you and me, right? He just fell on hard times. So we bring Ed into the hospice. He's a really good guy. The second or third night he's there, we get a nurse from an agency who's kind of a fill-in person for us, right? Filling in for one of our staff that's out that night. And I orient her to the people that are in the hospice. And she goes into Ed's room and she comes out and she's white as a ghost. And I said, what's the matter? She said, who is that man? I said, oh, that's Ed so-and-so. She said, that's my husband. She said, I haven't seen him in 25 years. Our relationship fell apart and he fell on hard times and we've been out of contact all this time. I didn't know where he was. And I said, well, you can't take care of him. I said, we got to take care of you too, So we helped facilitate this reconciliation between Ed and his wife. And she was there taking care of him with us at the time that he died, This is ordinary. In a way, it's a kind of a spectacular story in a certain way, but it's also very ordinary. Here's a regular guy. He was a construction worker, lost his job, lost his insurance, got sick, wound up, in a lot of debt, wound up on the street, regular guy. And through this series of strange circumstances, he came to be with us. The story gets better, by the way. Maybe a year later, I'm at a meeting with our board of directors. And, boards of directors are always worried about money. And so they said, Frank, we got to cut back on expenses. I said, no, we don't. I said, don't worry, the money's going to come. I said, this work that we're doing, it's so close to the ground, there's no place to fall. I said, we just got to keep doing what we're doing with heart. And they thought that was kind of Pollyanna. And just then the doorbell rings. The doorbell rings. And I go to the door, I answer the door, and it's the Federal Express guy. And I come back to the table with all the board people, and I open the envelope, and there's a check for $15,000 in the envelope. It's from Ed's cousin, who'd heard about us and sent us a check anonymously for $15,000 and did that every year for 10 years. Yeah. This work is remarkable. I mean, we have no idea. We're working with these big, big archetypes of working with death, and all kinds of things happen that you can't possibly imagine, right? All we can do is really aim ourselves in the right direction, act with integrity and heart, and get out of the way. Yeah? Get out of the way.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's ordinariness. Yeah, that's Zen in not some highfalutin kind of way, right? Regular everyday experience.
Yeah, man, I just imagine that you have so many incredible stories, and there's a lot of ways that there's a lot of questions I want to ask, because I know you have a lot of them, and I know that they come down to simple kindness, and living like you said, close to the ground, doing the work, not giving up, not worrying about money. These miracles happen, and then you live in the realm of miracles as well, which is amazing. Do you want to talk a little bit about your book and the 5 invitations and what you learned? A lot about what I talk about on the podcast is wanting to help people live fully, wanting to help people live in their hearts, wanting to, make it a little bit simpler for people. It's not this complex thing. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about these 5 invitations and some of these powerful things you've learned around being around death and transition for more than 30 years.
Yeah, I'm happy to. When we first started doing the work at the hospice, I made a rule that none of us could teach anything until we'd been doing it for 10 years, right? That was the rule. And so we didn't go out there and teach the public at all about it. And then when I started to write about it, I thought, well, I got to stew in this for a while before I write about it. So I stewed for 30 years before I decided to write something about it and finally put out this book. And it's called, as you say, The 5 Invitations, Discovering What Death Can Teach Us About Living Fully. And what the 5 invitations are 5 basic principles, we could say, are guiding guidelines that I used in working with people who were dying. But I found that they had a relevance for the rest of us. So I'll go through them with you, and you sort of see when we can, stop along the way here. But the first one is, and these were all taught to me by people who were dying. So the first one is, don't wait. Don't wait. Waiting for the next moment to arrive, we miss this one. Waiting for the moment of death, we miss all the moments in between. I mean, I've been with lots of family members who say to me, when is mom going to die? When is dad going to die? And I orient them back to this moment, to this precious moment that we have with this individual. So this first invitation is to not wait, not get lost in it. Now, that doesn't mean getting, swept away in a kind of urgency. It means being very present right here, right now. Yeah. Don't wait to tell someone that you love them. Yeah, do it now. Don't wait till the time of our dying to learn the lessons it has to teach us. It's a ridiculous gamble to imagine that at that point we will have the clarity of mind, the stability of heart, the strength of body to do the work of a lifetime. So that's don't wait, right? That's the first one. How's that sound?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. So it's not a panic, and it's not like get all the goodies. It's get present. Get here. Get here now. Okay, that's the first one. Second one is welcome everything, push away nothing. Welcome everything, push away nothing. Now, that sounds really good. It would make a great bumper sticker, but how do you do it? Right? So to welcome everything means that it doesn't mean you have to agree with everything or that you have to like everything that comes. It just means you have to be willing to meet it. Right? It's at your door, be willing to meet it. And we don't know what's going to wake us up in our life. We don't know what's going to, be the thing that we most need in our life. And so we don't push away anything. And that's what we do in meditation practice. We sit, we get still, we open the body, heart, and mind, and we observe and we feel and we sense. Yeah. Well, it's the same thing when you're with someone near the end of life. Welcome everything, push away nothing. Yeah. So that's the second invitation or second guideline. I'll tell you a story that goes with that. So there's this guy, I go to see this guy at San Francisco General Hospital in the psychiatric unit. And he's in the psychiatric unit because he tried to kill himself. And he tried to kill himself because he had terminal lung cancer and he couldn't imagine a future with any dignity in it. So I went in and I went into his room in the psychiatric unit, and they're pretty, often very stark places. And he was turned toward the wall in a kind of depression and withdrawal. And so I just sat there. And I sat with him for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes in silence. And finally, he looked over his shoulder and he said, "Who are you?" And I told him who I was and that I was from the Zen Hospice Project. And he said, "Nobody's ever sat with me this long in this room in silence before." And I said, "Well, I get a lot of practice at sitting in silence." I said, "Tell me, what do you want?" And this is a guy who tried to kill himself, right? I said, "What do you want?" And he said, "Spaghetti." I said, "Spaghetti?" I said, "Okay, we make really good spaghetti at our hospice. Why don't you come and live with us?" And he said, "Okay." And that was the end of the admissions interview, right? So the next day when he came to the hospice, we had this big bowl of spaghetti waiting for him because, spaghetti meant home and nurturance and familiarity, right? Now, he didn't stop wanting to kill himself because we gave him spaghetti. It was good spaghetti, but it wasn't that good. And so we had these great conversations every night. And he still wanted to take his life. And this was long before all the Death with Dignity acts. And so there was a book at the time that told you how to take your life when you have terminal illness. And he wanted this book, so I got him this book. And every night I read him a chapter. Because sometimes we got to go to the darkest places to find out what heals. Yeah. Now, in the end, he didn't take his life. In the end, he said to me, "Frank, I'm happier now than I've ever been." And I said, "Bullshit." And he said, "No, I am." I said, "A few weeks ago, you told me that you didn't want to live anymore because you couldn't write in your journals or walk in the park." And he said, "Oh, that was just chasing desire," he said. I said, "What do you mean? You mean these things aren't important to you anymore?" He said, "No, it's not the things." He said, "Now my pleasure comes from the coolness of the breeze and the softness of the sheets." I thought this was a remarkable turnaround for a guy I'd met in a psychiatric unit. Yeah. We never taught him to meditate. We didn't push any Buddhism on him. We just created a welcoming environment in which whatever needed to happen could happen. And we can do that for ourselves. We can do that for ourselves, create a welcoming environment. And no matter what chaos is going on in our minds or difficulties we may be having in our hearts, we can make a welcoming environment for it. Yeah. So that's the second invitation. Yeah. Should I keep going?
Yeah, no, beautiful, man.
Okay.
Yeah, there, man.
So the third one is bring your whole self to the experience. When we're taking care of somebody who's dying, we imagine it's our strength or our expertise that will help. But, to bring our whole self means we bring everything. We bring our fear. We bring our weakness. We bring our helplessness forward too. Yeah. That's what enables us to build an empathetic bridge to the other person. So when I'm working with someone who's dying, I got to be looking at my own fear, my own grief. Yeah. Otherwise, when I say to this other person, "I understand," they will sniff out my sentimentality and my insincerity. So I have to do my homework. Yeah. And then I have to bring all of that to the bedside. And it's the same with any relationship, right? Like anybody that you're involved with, right? You got to bring your whole self forward, not just, not just at the time of dying, right? If we want honest relationship, we want real relationship, that's what we got to bring forward. Everything, all parts of ourselves. Yeah. No part left out, we say. The fourth invitation is find a place of rest in the middle of things. And what that means is that we're always thinking we're going to rest later, right? Like when we go on a holiday or we, go on retreat or our list gets checked off, our email box gets emptied. My e-box never gets emptied. That's the way it is. So I have to learn to find a way of resting right in the middle of what I'm doing. Yeah. And we do that by bringing our attention fully and completely to whatever it is we're doing. Doesn't matter what we're doing, whether we're skiing down a mountaintop or, we're sitting quietly reading a book. We're fully engaged with what we're doing. So there was this woman, old Russian Jewish lady. She was 86, I think. Tough as nails, And she was living with us at the hospice. And the night she was dying, they called me to come and be with her. And so I came in. It was about 3 a.m. And my habit is to walk into the room and sort of see, is anything really needed before I jump in to help? And so there was a nurse's aide and attendant sitting on the bed with her, Pat, really great, wonderful woman. And so I just kind of sat in the corner. And while I was sitting on the couch in the corner, Pat turned to this woman And she said to her, Adele, you don't have to be frightened. We're right here with you, you know? And Adele, who was this tough character, right? She turned to her and she said, honey, if this was happening to you, you'd be frightened. Like that, right? So I stayed in the corner. Yeah. And then this very well-meaning attendant turned back to her and she said, you look a little cold, Adele. Would you like me to wrap a shawl or a blanket around your shoulders? And Adele shot back, of course I'm cold. I'm almost dead. Yeah. Wow. I hope I have half of that tenacity when I'm dying. Yeah. So I noticed two things. Sitting there on the couch, I noticed that Adele was having a lot of difficulty breathing. Often is the case at the end of life. And we'd made all the right interventions with morphine and oxygen, etc. But there's a struggle to dying. There's a labor to dying, just like there's a labor to getting born. Yeah. And Adele was struggling with that experience, and it was manifesting in the breath. So that was the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed was she didn't want any cheap advice. She wanted somebody who was real, sincere, and authentic. So I pulled up my chair right next to her, like you and I are sitting. And I said, Adele, would you like to struggle a little less? And she said, yes. And I said, okay, I noticed something. I said, I noticed right there at the end of the exhale, there was this little pause, this little gap before the next inhale. And I wonder what it would be like if you put your attention there just for a moment, just right there in that gap. And I'll do it with you. And I didn't guide her. I didn't try and teach her some breathing technique. I just breathed with her. When she would breathe in, I would breathe in. When she would breathe out, I would breathe out. And then I saw her place her attention in that gap at the end of the exhale, right? A little tiny nanosecond, right? But as she did this, I could see the fear in her face just wash away. And she relaxed. And she laid back on her pillow, breathing really gently for a few more minutes, and then died. I think Adele found the place of rest in the middle of things. Do you see? All the situations were the same. None of the conditions had changed. She was still dying. Breathing was still erratic. All the conditions are the same. We're always busy trying to manage the conditions to get our rest. Right? Get just the right relationship, just the right house, just the right setting. And then it'll all be okay, right? Adele just found a place of rest right in the middle of our experience. That's always there for us. Like, can we find it? Where is it for us? Where is that place of rest for us? And it's not one place. It's available to us in any moment, right? So that's the next guideline. And the last guideline is cultivate don't know mind. Now, I felt obliged to put something Zen-like in this list, yeah? So don't know mind, it sounds stupid, right? It sounds ignorant. Like, why would you cultivate a mind that doesn't know anything? But this don't know mind is different. This don't know mind is a mind that's open. It's not so filled with knowing. This is a mind of wonder, of curiosity, of innocence, actually, that wants to stay open to the experience. That doesn't cloud it with all of our preconceived ideas, all our beliefs. And so to cultivate don't know mind is to cultivate a mind that's ready. Suzuki Roshi, my teacher, called it beginner's mind. Yeah. He said in the beginner's mind, there are many opportunities. In the expert's mind, very few. Yeah. So when I'm working with someone who's dying, I have no idea how it's supposed to go. I don't know how this particular person is supposed to die. So I have to stay really open, very present. Yeah. And let the situation itself show me what to do. Yeah. It's like that in the rest of our lives. Yeah. We walk into situations thinking we know. But it's usually our knowing that gets in the way, right? And sort of clouds our ability to actually see the situation just as it is. So these are the 5 invitations. Don't wait. Welcome everything. Push away nothing. Bring your whole self to the experience. Find a place of rest in the middle of things. And cultivate don't know mind. Those are the principles I've used to guide me in working with people who are dying for 30 years. But I think they have a damn good relevance to the rest of us in leading a life that's happy and full of wisdom and compassion, and as a way of living fully in our lives. So I wanted to share them with a larger audience of people, and hopefully have people grab hold of them and make them their own. Yeah. So I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's amazing. I am super excited to read this book. Sitting here and talking to you, and just listening to you, and even the way that my voice is, like at the beginning of the podcast, is, your presence, like it's just literally sitting with like a Zen master. You've done the work, and I really love how you said, 10 years before I teach, and 30 years to sit, and you're really bringing forth wisdom and story and simplicity. So I'm racking my brain on the best question to ask you, to bring out that wisdom. So I guess
let me ask you one. What's the effect of this on you as you're just sitting here right now? Like, forget about having a bright question. What's the effect of me saying these things to you?
For me personally, it's just very calming. It's reassuring in the sense, because, I've studied a lot of Zen and things like that, and try to teach people that, but it's bringing these powerful lessons in a very, simple and practical way. And it just deepens, in Zen they talk about. So I just feel, very at peace, where the wisdom is so authentic and it's so clear and it's so not mystical, and it's not about, like you said, consciousness or mindfulness is now the new pop thing, and so you've got all these flashy ways to go about it, but it has nothing to do with that. It comes back to presence and love. So it just talking to you just makes me really calm, and I just want to listen and just hear more amazing stories, because in your presence and having those experiences, you're bringing out the wisdom, which is simple. And you're integrating it, and I can feel it like in my guts, that you've integrated it, and you're one of those people that's dedicated their life to helping other people, and it's super beautiful. And it's not like people think that you've got to do all these things, but you just made a choice that you wanted to serve and help. And if more people just lived from their heart in kindness and in love, and even serving in a small way, even just a smile, even just being present when you're at the grocery store. And I'm sure that when you're out in the grocery store and you're doing things, you're bringing that presence and that love and that kindness with you, and just literally going around and helping so many people. And if people could take from your book and these stories and just apply that once a day or once a week, and then maybe multiple times, and then ideally as much as possible, we can change the planet that way. They're really timeless and powerful lessons. So just, that's how I feel.
Well, that's great. Thank you. That's beautiful. And my hope would be people would just even take one of these invitations. That's why I call them invitations. Like, I invite you to really take them, and live into them. They're no good as slogans or bulleted points, on your refrigerator. You have to live into them, right? You got to make them your own. So, you've done a little bit of Zen, and so you have some kinship with the kind of things I'm talking about. But even if someone has never sat a moment of meditation, I think they can get this. In Zen, there's a ceremony that happens in Zen when there's a new abbot that's installed, or abbess that's installed at a Zen center. They call it the mountain seat ceremony, and it's meant to symbolize a monk climbing the mountain, and to awakening. But anyway, the way it works is this: that there's this kind of platform that's built, and the incoming abbot sits on that platform, and people come by to ask him or her questions, basically to test their capacity to lead the community with wisdom and compassion, right? And so they, it's kind of Dharma combat. It's very typical Zen. Anyway, so this one abbot is coming in, right? And I'm at this ceremony, and the student comes up and says, "Tell me something. What does Zen have to teach me about taking care of others?" And the abbot shoots back in a really fast way. He says, "What others? Take care of yourself." Like that. And then the student persisted and said, "Well, how do I take care of myself?" And the abbot, of course, shot back and said, "Care for others." So, what that little story is sharing with us is that we don't have to be good guys riding in on the white horse. Service or caring for one another is mutually beneficial. To take care of other people, right? We feel better, right, when we bring forward our compassion in our lives. It's not we're the good guys and know that they're the poor unfortunate ones. That's a story we've been told in this country, and charitable acts haven't changed anything in 2,000 or 3,000 years, right? Service is different. Service is me and you in the boat together. Yeah. And I find something in you that lives in me. Yeah. I see something in you. And so because of that, because I see myself in you, I can help you in a way that serves me. Yeah. I can, when I see my mother in the person that's dying, the way in which I care for that person really changes. Yeah. Yeah. So that can happen at any other stage, in any other relationship in our life, in any other stage of that relationship, you know. That's the empathetic bridge I was talking about earlier. When we actually see and feel something of ourselves in the other person, then the way in which we encounter them and the way in which we conduct relationship with them is totally different.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. 100% agree, man. So I know that you have a lot of stories. Do you have a favorite story? And I guess the book is full of them. But do you want to read a bit of the book? Is there a question that you would love me to ask, or how do you? I don't know. Just I'm fine to sit here and listen to stories for days.
Well,
or you want to go
so,
about it?
So we were talking, like we were just talking about this, caring for each other as a really simple exchange. Really, I like this old word, service, and service has kind of gotten a bad rep in our culture. We think of someone being a servant or service in a restaurant, but service is an old word, and it's different than helping or fixing. When you help someone, it's a kind of one up, one down relationship. You are, if you're the helper, you're the strong one, right? That means somebody else has got to be helpless. Or if you fix someone, you see them as broken, right? And instead about trying to repair them in some way. When you serve someone, you serve the wholeness in them, right? And you serve the wholeness in life that way. So when we get caught in our expertise, in our separateness, we often fall into helping or fixing. Helping, we see the person as weak. Fixing, we see them as broken. Whole, in service, we see them as whole. So I'm with this guy. This is way back in the early days of the AIDS epidemic. My friend John, very dear man. I love him very much. And like 4 of us are taking care of him. And this one morning, it's my day to take care of him. I come into the house and he's sitting at the kitchen table, eating his Cocoa Krispies. And he can't hold a spoon. He can't stand, and he can't say an intelligent word. All of that's disappeared overnight, right? Overnight. And I'm sitting there and I can't recognize my friend. So we go through the course of a day and I'm taking care of him, and it's really hard. I miss my friend. And John had these anal tumors and constant diarrhea. And so taking care of him was a lot of work, And we went through the day and into the evening, into the early hours of the morning. And I would have to move him from the toilet to the bath and back to the toilet again, like dozens of times, right? And I was exhausted. And I just wanted him to go to sleep and to somehow wake up in the morning and have this nightmare be over. And I'm embarrassed to say this as I'm speaking to you, but I realized I treated him sometimes like he was a child, because I couldn't find my friend, my normal functioning friend. Yeah. So in one of these moves from the bath back to the toilet, he's sitting on the toilet, his pajamas are down around his ankles, and I'm washing my hands in the vanity sink right in front of him. And I look in the mirror, and John hasn't spoken an intelligent word all day. But I look in the mirror and I can see him mouthing something to me in a really soft voice. And I turn around and he says in a kind of whisper to me, "You're trying too hard." And I was trying much too hard. Trying too hard to be somebody, me, Mr. Hospice, right? You know how it is when we're trying too hard, whether it's skiing or trying to conduct a relationship, it doesn't work, right? It's too effortful. And so I sat down there right beside the toilet next to my friend John, and I just started to cry, right? I just wept. At that moment, sitting there beside the toilet, shit everywhere, that was the most intimate moment of our whole friendship. There we were, completely helpless together. Yeah. No separation between us. Before that moment, I'd been afraid to enter that territory. Do you get it, Matt? I was scared to go there. I was afraid that if I went into that territory of helplessness, I'd get lost there and I couldn't be of any use to him. But actually, it was just the opposite. When I went into that place and let myself feel what it was like to be helpless. Then the situation showed us what to do next. We didn't stay stuck, you know? The situation showed us how to proceed, and that's what we did. Yeah. So that's an example of bringing your whole self to the experience. Yeah. That's to say that that's not just our strength or our knowing that serves us. Our weakness serves us. Our fear serves us. And if we push away any part of ourself, we can't be whole. You know, we just can't be whole. So we got to welcome in every part of our experience, every part of who we are. And those parts will enable us to conduct relationships with integrity and kindness and I hope add value to our own life and to the lives of others. Yeah.
Right. Just another beautiful story. When you're saying that, it has elements of the other, 5 lessons and surrender and you have this idea in your mind of this is what I have to do, and you just let go of it and you feel that helplessness and you could say nature or whatever it helps you move forward, and because you connect. You're not having this facade in your head of what you think you should do and how you need to do it. You're surrendering to the emotions, to everything that's happening, and it is challenging. It is your friend, and you've got all this stuff going on. So just a really powerful experience. One question that I wanted to ask, because I think, I got downloaded one really good one. A lot of people listening, what advice do you have for people who have lost a loved one? Some people I know have lost children. Some people I know have lost brothers. And some people have lost kids. And, I'm sure you've seen this where, a marriage can break because of that, and, losing I'm too soft. Like, I know there's something going on in the universe where I haven't had to lose anyone close yet because it would just break me. Now that I'm getting older, I think that I'd be able to handle it a bit better. But what advice do you have for people who are struggling with loss?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things about grief and loss is that advice doesn't help, right? And what helps is human presence, right? Simple human kindness we were speaking about before. So, when someone is experiencing a deep loss, maybe the loss of a child or even the loss of a relationship, the best thing we can do is sit next to them, and keep them company in a way, and let them take the lead and not try and impose our ideas on them. For me, that's the most important thing. There is no one way through grief, and I think our tendency to want to manage the experience of grief leads us to strategies that have us manipulating the other person's experience. The only way through grief is through the middle, right? And that means to feel it all, to be with all of it, right? Sometimes our grief is about what we've had and lost, and sometimes it's about what we never got to have, right? That's the everyday grief of our life. That's the one that, when we turn toward those everyday experiences, it prepares us in some way for these great big losses of our life. Yeah. There's no one right way to grieve. Men grieve differently than women. Some people cry an ocean of tears. Other people only feel numbness. There's a lot of faces of grief. There's the sadness, of course, and fear, but there's also relief. When we've been taking care of someone for a long time, maybe somebody's been living with a terminal illness for years, we feel some relief. But there's also blame and shame. We feel we should have done more. We should have got him to the hospital sooner. Yeah. There's this period where you just feel like you're walking through molasses, where you don't know to turn left or right at the end of the driveway. You can't find your keys. Yeah. So, there's lots of models out there about different stages of grief and this kind of thing. And I don't necessarily agree with all of them. I think there's some wisdom in all of them. But the problem with all these models is that we confuse the map with the territory. And we start to impose a map on people's experience. And that's like, it's like where you live, right? If you go out and start walking in the wilderness and you're only looking at the map, you're going to miss what's most important. So when people have experienced a loss like this, I sit with them and I invite them to turn toward their experience, to turn toward what hurts. That's where the healing is always found. Yeah. right in the middle of the suffering. Yeah. I was saying this once I was up in the Northwest, and I was saying, turn toward your suffering. And this guy said to me, that's like telephone poles. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. I said, what do you mean telephone poles? He said, oh, I used to install telephone poles. And he said, when you put them in the ground, he said, they're about 40 feet high. And he said, they're unstable at first, and they can fall. And if they fall on a man, they could break his back. He said, so the first day when I was on the job, I said to my partner, if that pole starts to fall, I'm running like hell that way. And his partner was an old timer, and he said, oh, you don't want to do that. He said, if that pole starts to fall, you want to go right up to it. You want to put your hands right on it. He said, it's the only safe place to be. You see? We're always running in the other direction from our pain, from our suffering. And it whacks us in the back of the head, takes us by surprise. Yeah. And the only safe place to be with our pain is to put our hands mercifully, tenderly, kindly, compassionately on what hurts, and to be with it, to stay with it. And that's what compassion is. Compassion is that capacity that allows us to stay with what we would otherwise like to run away from. Yeah. And that's true whether it's a moment of dying, a moment of grieving, or just what we want. Yeah. Turn toward it.
Amazing. Frank, another just tremendous, beautiful answer. I wish I could talk to you all day. I know that you have a lot of amazing, lots of work to do, lots of stuff going on. Do you want to leave the audience with like a final thought, also where they can find more about you and like some final?
Yeah, well, I mean, I should be better at promoting these things. I'm not. There is a website. It's called 5invitations.com, and people can go to that, and they can, and it's not just of course, it talks about the book, but it also has in there some really great articles and some audios to listen to that we just put up for free because we want people to get access to this information. So they can go to 5invitations.com and find out about it there. I want to leave people with, the idea I want to leave them with is that life and death are a package deal. You can't separate them. In Zen, in Japanese Zen, there's a term called shoji, and shoji means life and death, and it's just these two words with a small little hyphen in between them. Yeah. So the only thing separating life and death is a very thin line. And when we come to understand how precarious this life is, then we come to appreciate just how precious it is. Then we don't want to waste a moment of it. Then we want to jump into our life with both feet, and live it fully, right? Like I said earlier, we want to tell the people we love that we love them. So my encouragement is to invite people to keep death as their advisor, not in some morbid way, but as a way of really appreciating and encouraging us to step into this life, to jump into it with both feet. Yeah, that's it. That's all I would offer. And thank you for doing this.
Amazing. Well, I just want to thank you, honestly, from the bottom of my heart and everything that I am for who you are and what you've done on the planet and your service. And man, just all the stuff that you've done and to tell people sometimes, like, I'm just at a level to recognize other masters. I don't see myself as a master, but I see myself on the path of trying. And I recognize you 100% as an absolute master, full of integrity and wisdom and knowing. So just thank you so much for your work and the book. So I highly recommend everybody get that book. I'm going to get it right away because there's very few, and it takes years. Mastery takes years, and you've done it and you've walked the path. So I just have really deep love and gratitude for you and your work and everything. So, anything you ever need from me, you got it. You're the man. I love you.
Well, you've really done it. Thank you for sharing this work with your audience. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, brother. Okay. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Thank you, everybody who's listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Okay.
See you, Frank.